This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, producing.
It is with pleasure that I once again welcome you to the American Theater Wing Seminars on Working in the Theater, which are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. It is the 23rd year of these seminars, and they have been the most exciting thing that I think we have done. It is also fitting that I tell you that this is the 50th anniversary of the Wing's Tony Awards, which is also a very exciting time for us. The Wing does what it has been doing for these past 50 years in every way that we can to say theater to the community. We go to hospitals, nursing homes, and aid centers. All of this is done with the people who work in the theater. It stems out of really the belief of a woman named Antoinette Perry, for whom the Tony Award was named. And perhaps we are best known for the Tony Award. But year-round, the American Theater Wing does what the Tony Award stands for, theater. It was not created to reward the longest line at the box office or the best review, but to reward the achievement of excellence in the theater and to pass that along to the community. So year-round, we work. We go to high schools and we say theater in high schools is very important. We bring the people that work in the theater, the designers and the directors and the singers and the actresses and the producers, to tell the young children in the high schools what it is to work in the theater. We have a program that's called Introduction to Broadway, and that program is just that. It brings students from the 5 boroughs of New York to see a Broadway show, most of them for their very first time on Broadway and their very first time in a Broadway house. It's a wonderful, exciting, and very heady experience for them. And one, not only that excites them to see the theater, but also gives them role models, because from time to time we were able to have discussions with the people who they have seen, as well as the stage manager and the house manager, who show them that there are other areas of the theater that they can work in. We also have a scholarship and grant program, and that has the same qualifications. We give awards, monetary awards, to off-Broadway and off-Broadway shows. And these awards are given to honor an achievement of excellence over the years of what they have produced, what they have created, and what they have contributed to the community. And so you see that we are hard at work doing what we do. We enjoy what we do, and I think that through the years, to have the reputation that the Wing has, we have been doing it fairly well. And speaking of reputation, it is the American Theater Wing's reputation that brings the kind of people to these seminars that we do. And this seminar is no exception. It's on the production of Masterclass, that most exciting and wonderful play that's on Broadway right now. And this is a producing team that made it all possible. So you will learn how easy it is to produce a successful Broadway show. George White will take over now and introduce the cast of Masterclass. Thank you, George.
On my far right is the stage manager, Dianne Trulock, and immediately to her left is casting director Alan Filderman, and on my immediate right is producer Lewis Allen, who produces both for theater and motion pictures and also for television, and whose Broadway credits include I'm Not Rappaport, True, and A Few Good Men. Now on the far left is Doris Blum, who is assistant to the co-producer of the project, Robert Whitehead, and immediately next to her is Jim Weiner, the advertising representative from LeDunn, Wildner, and Weiner. And immediately to his right is Bill Evans, who is the press agent and public relations. And immediately on my left is Karen Day Cody, who plays the role of Sophie in the production and originated the role at the gathering at Big Fork in Montana. So she goes back from the very beginning of this. So here we go with the master class on master class, if you will. I wanted to start by, not just because she is dressed so beguilingly as a captain, in reality, she is a captain of the ship. And I'm sure all of us in the theater know that if there wasn't a decent stage manager, indeed an incredibly critical part of the whole production revolves around the captain of the ship here. So I wanted to start with Dianne, who, if you would, first of all, do a couple of things for us, and that is tell us a little bit about what the stage manager does, the care and feeding that goes therein, and also how you got to be a stage manager. That isn't something, well, there is now, I know, classes in some conservatories for stage management, but it never came that way.
No.
So.
Well, what we have to do to keep a show going is basically we're responsible for the running of the show. We're in rehearsals. Usually you're in rehearsals from the very first day, and you're responsible to take down all of the blocking. Also to listen very closely to what the director is telling the actors, and to keep those intentions, because once the show opens, the director leaves, and many times a stage manager will have to go and say, remember, we worked on this and this and this. So you're basically a caretaker for the director. Once you go into the theater, you're start working with the designers, and the lighting designers, the set designers, the sound designers, and they create a look and a style for the show, and they work in collaboration with the director. And once the show opens, the designers leave, and it's the stage manager's responsibility to keep the integrity of the design team also. We're also responsible for every time you see a light change, or you hear a sound cue, or you see a piece of furniture moving on and off stage, there's somebody, the stage manager, backstage telling a crew member to do that. So if, basically, if we were sitting here and this table was on a track many times, and it tracked on or off, we would be telling a stagehand when to do it. It's our responsibility to keep the show as close to the original intention as possible. Also, to work with understudies and make sure the understudies are capable and ready to go on at a moment's notice. And believe me, it can be a moment's notice. And basically to keep the show going. Any problems that happen backstage, we have to take care of them. Many times problems out front, too. Somebody's talking in the audience, whatever, we have to go out and try and make sure that they are calmed down or whatever. So we're keeping it all up in the air, and also it's very important to keep the integrity of the production and of the designers and the directors. Now, your other question was how
you got there.
Yeah. Well, I started off, interestingly enough, as I think probably everybody did, as an actress. I couldn't sing, so I lost a lot of work that way. But I wanted to stay within the creative end of it, and I started working in a production office, and I was answering phones, and they knew I was interested in stage management, and so a show was available. I had to read for the show as an understudy, and I got the role as an understudy, and I think I got it on my reading, too. And that's how I learned. It was very unique. I learned on Broadway, which is a very unique thing. Usually it doesn't happen that way.
Well, let's go from the captain to the admiral, to keep the nautical metaphor intact. And that is Louis Allen. Would you talk a little bit about, one, how you pulled together all of the pieces that a producer does to make this show happen? I know it started in Montana, and we'll get onto that. And then Doris, if he says anything that is not true, you can correct him from that, because you are also in the middle of all that. But Louis.
Right. Well, actually, of course, it did begin in Montana before I was involved, and Terrence McNally wrote this play with Zoe Caldwell in mind, which Zoe did it there. I was not there. Were you? You weren't there.
No, I wasn't there either.
In any case, it went very well, and then Bob Whitehead, who was the primary producer of this, we share an office together and have worked together a great many times in the past, asked me, gave it to me, and said, would you read this? Would you be interested in co-producing it? Well, I read it, and I went crazy instantly. I said, that very day, I think, or the next day, it's a wonderful play, because it just leapt from the pages. I thought the most dramatic, overtly dramatic script I've ever read. And I said, I'll co-produce, I'll take any part of it you want. And my wife, who is a playwright and screenwriter, she was in Europe, but she came back, and I knew she would, and she had the same reaction. I mention this because I was curious, because Bob Whitehead had sent it to various other producers. I think he was very insecure about the money raising of the thing. And I'm kind of shocked at how few people understood it. I'd sent it to a couple of theater owners in that regard, and they said, well, you know, after your opera buffs, who's going to want to see this play? I couldn't understand that. In any case, it was a long, slow process, because we started in Philadelphia, well over a year ago. I think it was something like February of last year, at the Plays and Players Theater, a tiny 350-seat house, and they presented as part of their season. It was very successful, and I'd expected to go from there into New York. However, the part, as many of you know, have seen it, is a monumental theatrical part, and I think Zoe Caldwell felt even the 4 weeks there, she was just getting into the part, and before we'd gotten that far, we had offers both from Gordon Davidson at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles and from the Kennedy Center. Both wanted it to come there, and so we decided, well, let's go ahead and play, let the thing develop. It was an extraordinarily difficult part, so we went to, after a hiatus of, I think, a month or so, we went to the Mark Taper, where it was enormously successful and extended the run, and then to, again, a short hiatus to Washington, to the Eisenhower. Same thing happened. It was sold out, and we extended a bit, and then on to New York. But basically, that was the process. By the time we got through, I would say, to Los Angeles, we were inundated with anybody you ever heard of calling, wanting to invest in the show. It was a very easy one in that regard, though it wasn't that simple but at the very beginning, because of this sort of reservation about it being an elite show about opera.
Do you have a cadre of investors that you go to each time?
I do. I have, yes. And Bob has too. Yes, I have various people who, I mean, it doesn't apply to major musicals. You know, you're getting the millions. But in the shows I've done, I mean, we did Vita in Virginia, for example, $400,000 off Broadway, which is remarkable. Right. And that kind of, this was $600,000. These are very modest, and it's therefore individual investors loom very large, as they used to do in the old days when almost everything was financed that way. Once you get up into the big musical field, it's a totally different ballgame. You have to go to record publishers and theater owners and movie companies and so on. But I do have a very loyal group of investors, and they just come in everything I do.
And it's, Doris, your job to make sure when they call, they can get these people on the phone, I assume.
That's right. Partly that, sure.
Were you in on the beginning, right then, after, when the script went to Louis?
Yes.
Oh, well,
yes.
Doris has been on it longer than I have.
Yeah, no, I knew when Zoe went out. Zoe hesitated about going out to Montana. And she thought, oh my God, way out there. And she was tired. She just finished working on Vita in Virginia. She was the director of that, and so she was pretty exhausted, and she thought she didn't want to go out to Montana, and Robert really convinced her to. And there she met the charming Karen, and really got into the play, or started to get involved in the play.
Well, now we have, and we brought up Karen, and before we get to Karen, we want to know how Karen got to the production, which brings me to Alan. And although we said it was Terrence McNally wrote the play for Zoe, where does that leave you? I know that, but that's a rhetorical question. But so we have to find other people in the production.
Actually, I came on after Karen was involved, because I came aboard after the Montana workshop. It was workshopped in Montana. Karen was a part of the cast there. And then they decided to do the play at the Philadelphia Theater Company, which is Sarah Goranczak's theater in Philadelphia. I happened to be their casting director. So I was brought in to meet with Mr. Whitehead and Mr. Folia. Luckily, I have a background in casting opera as well as theater, so I got the job. Karen had already played the role in Montana, and so I came aboard after Zoe, and although we weren't totally sure that Karen was going to come, because Karen lives in Seattle and has a happy life in Seattle. We were never quite sure that she was going to want to come, and so, but Karen was already involved, Zoe was already involved. I was brought on for the other roles.
Well, now tell me how, I know there are singers, and there's also an accompanist who has to be, in a sense, cast. It isn't just somebody who plays the piano, although it has to play the piano. So how do you find the people? Because as you say, you cast opera, which is, you know, a fairly, it would seem to me, a fairly new thing. In the old days, you have the impresario that does this. But you're...
Luckily, because I had been hired to do some crossover opera pieces for the Houston Opera Company, I had at my beck and call a list of opera managers, which is a different world than theatrical agents. And I just knew how to get in touch with them. I knew who they were. I knew who to call, which helped in casting, certainly in casting the tenor. And because I'm a casting director who casts a lot of musicals, I work with a lot of musical directors. And I've always known who those people are. When I was presented with this play and I saw I had to have someone who played the piano beautifully but could also act and be on stage for over 2 hours, David came to my mind immediately, because I knew he moved to New York to be an actor. I knew he was in the original cast of Merrily We Roll Along, and I knew that he was, you know, a diva piano player. I mean, my very first list, I think he was the first name, I think, on my very first list for the role.
It was interesting because yesterday on the seminars we had Lenny Foglia, and he said also it was wonderful because this is the one person when you had the call that actually sat erect through the whole thing. Yes. You know, and was into it rather than, you know.
Which came first in your seeking for the cast, the operatic or the musical part or the actors?
It's an unbelievable combination of both. I mean, they have to, especially whoever was going to play Sharon and whoever was going to play Tony, it has to be totally believable that they're opera singers. They both sing full arias. Lenny and Terrence always wanted to not have Broadway singers doing a good stab at an aria, but for it to sound like a true opera singer. But they have full scenes, they're on stage, they have to be able to act. And it always was presented to me that it had to be both. The way I approached it, though, is that was to find opera singers who could act, as opposed to actors who could sing opera. You can always find actors who can sing. Actors who can sing opera would be trickier. I approached it from finding opera singers who could act, and luckily, I think we did.
Sure. Karen, how did you find Montana then, and how in Seattle, and when'd your way to Montana and then here?
Well, a girlfriend of mine does this play conference in Montana, and I would just go out there basically as a vacation, which a lot of people did. I mean, that was part of the attraction of going to Montana. She would write to playwrights and say, we can offer you 2 weeks.
Where in Montana is it?
In Big Fork, a little resort town. She would offer the playwrights 2 weeks in beautiful Montana and a company of professional actors, and that the playwright could work on whatever they wanted to work on, which for playwrights is really rare. Usually they're commissioned. They're told, you know, we want you to write this and this and this for us. And for a playwright to be offered the chance to work on whatever they feel like working on is really rare. And so a lot of playwrights found this as their home, their writing home. They would say that if it wasn't for Big Fork every year, they wouldn't sit. So it was a great experience for everybody. And Terrence, of course, brought this script out, and he had the first act written when he got there, and I think he finished the second act there in Montana. And
Well, but you're an opera singer, is that correct?
no,
You're not?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. I sing musical theater, but I'm faking it.
You're I see. Aha.
Don't tell anybody.
No, that's right. Do you go on vocal rest? We heard about vocal rest yesterday, which gives you an Excedrin headache, I imagine, because these people do go on vocal rest. So
they do, but luckily we also have spectacular understudies.
Yeah.
And we haven't. It hasn't been a problem when a couple of the cast members have had to go on vocal rest. Their understudies have been spectacular, and I don't think anybody's ever been disappointed at all by an understudy's performance.
Well, they almost aren't understudies, and they almost are like interact.
Absolutely. Yeah. And some have been on quite a bit, others not at all.
Uh-huh. Well, now we heard about the fact that the first thing, which is Louis, the reaction of some theater owners and people saying only opera buffs would like this, right. So which means that both Jim and Bill have your work, or seemingly cut out for you, if that is indeed the take that people are going to make on this. How do you do that? How do you get around that? How do you
Which
sell
one
more?
came first?
Exactly.
Of you?
Which one of you came first?
How old are you, Bill? Take it away. I guess we came to the project at about the same time.
Who makes that decision of that it is Bill and it is
the producer?
The producer does. So when you're casting your ship, in a sense, they come on at the beginning of this.
And so obviously you interact very, very closely. You have to for all of these things.
We've worked together before, yes.
And
I suppose that the same thing would be true for Bill as it is for me in the advertising field. We try and keep abreast of all of the productions that are going to be coming to Broadway or off Broadway, and maintain contact with the various producers in an effort to get their attention, as anybody connected with the production would, and apply for work. Mm-hmm. We requested that we get a copy of the script early on, and we were privileged to do so. And as Louis said, we fell in love with it immediately. All of us who read it at the ad agency thought that it was just a dynamic property. And when you speak about the opera world and the music and the drama world and Broadway in general, there wasn't a problem with that. I didn't listen to any of the music the first time I looked at the piece, and yet it all came to life right from the written page. And it seemed to me that it was going to attract a wide audience. That was never a real problem for me. We had three great entities, as we crassly put it in my field, to sell. And that's the wonderful play that Terrence wrote, and the marvelous actress who is Zoe Caldwell. And thirdly, and not unimportantly, Maria Callas, who is a worldwide renowned entity even today. And those three elements gave us a wealth of material with which to work.
Now, how did you choose? I'm learning a new advertising speak, the icon, which I just learned was the symbol for the show. That's after all these years, I didn't know what an icon was, except something was in a Russian corner that people bowed to. But anyway, what gave you? Who chose the symbol of Zoe and that? Was that you, or how did you come to that?
Well,
in terms of the marketing,
it's a developmental process that takes a little bit of time. In this case, we presented rough ideas of how we thought the play should be presented graphically to the public. It did not include such a dominating illustration of Zoe to begin with, but as we developed the piece, we felt that was most important. We combined the images of Maria Callas.
It's very clever, as you can see. It's extremely clever, the window card that's done.
Well, we went through images of Callas to begin with at great length for a long period of time, until we found something that we all thought was the appropriate piece. The producers, of course, in anything that I have to have the final say, and eventually we all fell in love with the image that you see ghosted in the artwork. we began to feel that Zoe's portrayal was so magnificent, so large, and she's got such a great following in theater that it was very important to make her the focal point of the piece. And we combined photography and illustration and involved the third element, which is the beautiful set as a backdrop for the artwork. And those three things came together in a long process to arrive at what you see today.
And Doris, it was your job to ride herd on pulling all these things together from the producer's point of view. I assume meetings and juggling all of that.
Yeah, that's true. We always had to schedule meetings with all the department people, Louis and the other producers, and one of our producers lives in Boston, so she had to be notified when there was an important session, and Bill and his staff, and Jim.
And Doris was also a key coordinator between Louis and Robert and Spring and Zoe, because you worked with Zoe a very long time as well. And Zoe Caldwell immerses herself in her roles, and this is so, there's so much to immerse in, if that's the correct terminology. And she had all these books, and Doris would get these more books, and then there'd be more books, and then there'd be a favorite photo that Louis found or Robert found or Zoe found. And this would get to Jim, and Jim's art director, Patrick Flood, who actually did the piece. Also, my feeling is that all of us do what we do, I think, pretty well, but we're not artists. So if we can express what we have in our heart or soul or sense of the show, which it's an articulate group, and if that art director and Jim and his staff can hear what they're saying, then go away and think, I think I know what they're after. I think I can, and the dream is, and in this case I think it's true, is that they go away and they come up with another spin that's even better than maybe what, you know, my own non-art directing imagination can pull together. And this was, I think, an inspired piece, and in color in the New York Times, when we took our announcement ad, it was, it's a newish thing in the New York Times.
So it was sensational.
It's for them to make lots more money, and they do, of course. But it's also up to speed in the world of graphics that people are used to seeing. And we live in a world of videos and CDs and the most sophisticated MTV graphics, and you know, we're bombarded with all this stuff, and the kids growing up, the MTV style of cutting everything, and you know, and here we are presenting a show about an opera singer, you know, and the reaction that some of Louis's theater owners and so forth had, we didn't want to get stuck there. So ultimately, I think it's sort of a sophisticated sense of the marketplace. And in this marketplace where there is gangster rap and everything else, I feel that this piece represented, when you put your money down and you bought a ticket and you went to Seamaster class, it coordinated with the sense you got when you opened the New York Times that day, and the color and the texture of it and the feeling of it. I think it's extraordinarily successful. And it's a very hard thing to do, to get it right. And I think the collaborative thing in this case was the real success, and Patrick Flood.
Well, the hard thing to do was to develop a piece that would be as classy as the show is, to represent it in that high manner.
Does costs come into it? Money? Do you say there's just so much money for this, or do you go out and bring us in the piece that will be right?
Money is a concern, of course, in all the endeavors. That's always a factor.
But you're not constricted in the budget to
No. We wouldn't quit till we get it right.
Right.
It took a long time,
we spent an awful lot of effort on it. It took a long time to get it just so, just perfect. And from my point of view, that really wasn't a factor. We're not in a charity business, but by the same token, that's our work, and it has to represent us as well as the show. And so, yes, money is a factor, but we weren't going to let that stand in our way of developing a piece that we thought was perfect.
Well, now you mentioned about that it took a long time. I mean, you had both a challenge and a mission to convey to Jim.
Well,
and then eventually,
one of the first pieces of art you presented was that drawing, in essence, the face of Callis and this, which we liked.
Yes.
But it was a long process of working on it and honing in on it and getting it right, it probably took several months, I think, did it not?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was one point when we were standing, I think it was in Doris's office, and Zoe came in to see it. And we were all, I think, Louis and Robert and Zoe, and Doris were standing there, and she's looking at it, she goes, "Does my picture have to be in it?" And I said, "Yes, move on." Because we've been grueling over this thing, and yes was the answer. And then once she accepted that, she also was very enthusiastic and supportive about it. And that's a part of it, too, that you want everybody to feel good about it.
Isn't that unusual to have your star come in for that?
Well, yes and no. Ultimately, though, if it's any kind of a likeness of the star, then it would not be unusual. It would be, they would probably have it in their contract that they would have any likeness of them that we had control over, meaning photos that we shoot ourselves for our publicity purposes or advertising purposes or artwork, that we would explicitly get their approval. I don't think so. Explicitly.
No, a lot of big stars really are very tough about that. They have in their contracts, and they go over every photograph. Zoe doesn't really seem to care, but if you do something she doesn't like, she'll tell you.
Right.
But so one would always clear it with the star, because you don't want to be unhappy.
And to that point, we had to actually work directly with Zoe. We worked from a sketch of her in profile to begin with, to develop from the point that Louis mentioned, where we had a rough layout that gave us the general idea that we wanted. But at some point during the Philadelphia engagement, I took an artist down there, and we sat with Zoe in her dressing room and sketched her, and worked directly with her on that image from which this developed. That was simply a pencil sketch, but it gave us a springboard to develop what you finally see.
And the other end of from the pencil sketches, Louis happens to be very computer literate and art literate, and he got the idea, and Jim was able to implement it. We went over there one day, and we were morphing in their computer, where, you know, okay, let's have 10% of Callous face and 90 Zoe, and let's give 75 Zoe. So it was what we got sort of looked like Betty Crocker to me, and it didn't work. But it was really interesting.
The idea was to get a face that looked both like Zoe and Callous, but of course it looked like neither one finally.
But it's just indicative, I think, of the kind of depth that this producing team cares about getting it right. And I hate to sound like the PR guy, but I will say that this project is one, and I've been doing this for 24 years now, and every now and then it comes together in a way that every part of the producing unit, as well as the creative unit, somehow it all comes together, and it comes together well. And it has to do with the people, it has to do with Terrence McNally, who is a playwright at the top of his game, won the Tony Award last year for Love, Valor, Compassion, wrote a script from the rock bottom of his soul about someone who had inspired him from his earliest years. Louis and Robert and Doris are in the producing royalty of Broadway, who have been here producing Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, everyone you've ever heard of. And they care about the quality. Zoe is just a talent beyond description, and they listen to you. These people listen. We also have a young director making his Broadway debut, Lenny Folia, and the collaboration between Terrence and Lenny and the producers. We have two people making their Broadway debuts on the stage, Karen Day Cody and Jay Hunter Morris. Also, Audra McDonald is a wonderful star who burst on the scene in Carousel. Somehow, all of these quality things, starting in Philadelphia for us, in Montana for you, everybody was encouraged and supported to do what they do, and you go to the wall, and you go to the point where the producers have to make the decision, ultimately. However, they listen and encourage and want to hear, and it develops. It really does.
I agree that the result is everything that you say, and it's interesting to hear how it all came together. But I'd like to take you back a step. Why did Terrence come to Bob Whitehead and Alan first? Was there any connection? Had you done anything?
No, he came
before?
because of Zoe. He wrote it for Zoe Caldwell.
Because Zoe had
Zoe
done
was
a
married
play.
to Bob Whitehead.
Yes.
I suppose everybody knows.
Zoe did a play called A Perfect Ganesh at the Manhattan Theater Club. And that was an experience, the first experience she had working with Terrence, and Terrence working with her. And I think that he saw her talent in a big way, And I think he's the kind of playwright who usually has somebody in mind when he writes a play. And he thought of Zoe for this particular play and approached her. And he himself had attended many of Maria Callas's master classes at Juilliard. So this was a thought and a thing and an embryo that was growing in his head and heart, I think, for many years. And then Zoe was the personification of it. She could bring it to life. And so that's how.
Now that you've got it and you're all set, who's the first one that comes into line? Is it, you say, well, now the general manager, or where do you start building your?
Once you have the project.
Everything's
together.
set now and you're ready to go, and you know this is what you want to do, you and Bob and Doris.
Well, we work with the general manager who is supposed to be here, Stuart Thompson.
Yeah,
unfortunately, he is managing an ideal husband.
General manager.
Managing an ideal husband, which is the name of a play.
Yes,
by the way.
Tell me who's the first one that comes on. Is that the
Well,
general
Stuart, as a general manager, is on from the beginning with us. In fact,
Right,
he is
that's
in
what I
our
wanna
office, shares in our office. Doris and Bob Whitehead and I and Stuart all have an office together. So he is right from the beginning because he has to do all the construction of they do all the contracts and all the.
Does he hire you?
Yes, he does, in tandem with.
Well, Dianne has been with us for quite a while on a number of shows. She's been with me and with various, you can tick off some other ones. So in fact, we have a kind of a cadre of people that we work with regularly, and Bill Evans has done, I don't know how many, every show we've done, right, for some time, several years.
So you're one of the few production companies that are constantly in business with offices and a staff and the same people to call upon.
Right, I think
there are not many of that around anymore, are there?
Well, there's some, but a lot of them, there are the major ones, such as Cameron McIntosh and so on, which are industries, in effect, I think of them. But I think of the smaller, there are not very many smaller independent producers.
You have a real team or an ongoing
that's ongoing system.
Right.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, now where does the nitty-gritty come in? Where do you get your money? Where do you get your investors from?
Well, as you says, we all have old friends that invest regularly anyway. There are a lot of professionals, when they smell something coming in that's hot, they all jump in, want to get into it. As I said, in this case, it was slow at first, but in my case, I just said I will commit to the whole, whatever it is, the whole thing anyway, going in. It was a question of who you would let in this case.
I guess if you were a young or starting out producer, I don't know, you might start with your Christmas card list. I don't know. I mean,
that's exactly it, yes.
Okay, right, fair enough. Great. I wanted to also go on to getting back to Alan for a moment, because not only because obviously you were brought in pretty early, I would assume, in the process.
Yes.
And that's one thing. What was the charge given to you, apart from just getting? You talked about opera singers not singing actresses, but at the same time, a little bit more about for people who wanted to get to a casting director. What do you do? Do you go around and see things? Obviously, you must. But how do you get your stable?
Sure. Again, for this play, the process was a little different. But in general, yes, certainly going to see as much theater as I possibly can. Also, going to see as many movies and watching as much television. It's a hard life. As I possibly can, and I naturally just pay attention to the actors and try and remember names, always look at cast lists. The other thing I think is having very good relationships with agents and knowing who the smart ones are, knowing that when the smart ones call you and say you have to see this person, being smart enough to say okay and not no, and always trying to have an open door so that I'm constantly meeting new people and new talents. Most of which would come in handy for everything except this play. Again, because I was extraordinarily excited when this was happening for me, because I was the casting director for Philadelphia Theater Company. I had cast a production of Lips Together.
Stop for a minute and tell us about the Philadelphia Theater Company. Why did they go there? Tell me a little bit about
Well,
that.
actually, I think it's because, and I'm not an expert on this, but I believe it's because Sarah Garanzik had produced a production of Lips Together, Teeth Apart the year before that Terrence came down and saw and was extraordinarily impressed with. I believe this is true. And Sarah being an extremely intelligent woman then just opened the door to Terence and said, if you have anything new ever, please come here. And so, if I'm getting any of this wrong, so I believe that Terence then, when he had a new play and wanted to do something out of town, not bring it right into New York, contacted Sarah about getting the process started, getting it started there. Is that?
That's correct. He also felt that that theater was perfect for the show. I mean, the theater itself.
Exactly, because they rent.
What kind of a theater is it? Is it a regional theater? Is it a not-for-profit theater?
They rent a theater in Philadelphia called the Plays and Players Theater, which is a jewel box recreation of a larger theater in Philadelphia, which it used to be called the Schubert, now it's the Merriam. This is a scaled-down version of the same theater, and it's a very, very beautiful physical place to do it, and a very good place.
And is it a regional theater? What is it? How is it classified?
Yes, the Philadelphia Theater Company is a LORT regional theater.
Do you want to explain what LORT is?
League of Regional Theaters?
It's the League of Regional Theaters, and they're the regional theaters all over the country, hopefully in as many cities as possible.
LORT stands for?
League of Regional Theaters. They're non-profit. It's different than the Broadway for-profit production, and the contract is different that the actors work under. All the rates are different. And most of the theaters around the country are LORT theaters. There's some commercial houses in each city.
They get touring packages.
They get touring packages, but most of the theaters that exist all around the rest of the country outside of New York are non-profit, different contract theaters.
You know, you bring up something that also, we talk about the theater, we're talking about the physical theater, and they're talking about perfect for the play. Now, who made that decision? Is that Terence? Is that Leonard? Is it, because obviously you're now also in a relatively small Broadway house. Well, who...
Well, Terence wanted it done there, and several people looked at it. Everybody just agreed that it was a wonderful place to do it.
Rather than doing it, I mean, you're going to be sold out, but...
no, it's supposed to be a concert hall this is being played in, and it just seemed to fit that description. A beautiful theater that you felt that you were in a concert hall, a lovely concert hall. It was no problem about it. I mean, everybody agreed that it was a perfect place to do it.
So you're in a sense casting the theater as well.
Oh, absolutely. You always do that, yes.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's an important consideration, particularly in this piece. And speaking of this now, we've been talking a great deal about, again, the icon, the image of Zoe Caldwell. But I know that shortly she is leaving the show and you have Patti LuPone. What are you going to do, and whose job is it to do what?
Well, I guess some of the same things occur that occurred in the original developmental process. We collaborate. We discuss first how we think the transfer should be made. We're already working with images of Patti LuPone in an effort to present her in as dynamic a way as we have with Zoe Caldwell. And we will develop a transition piece and replace Zoe's image with Patti's image. It may not be identical, but it will be close enough to retain the feel that we developed initially. That was from day one. We all wanted this play to have a long life, and we knew that Zoe would do it for a period of time in the best of circumstances. So there was, from the very beginning, there was always thought of how will we proceed. We had that in the back of our mind when we developed the piece initially. And so it will evolve into a piece that presents Patti
Bill, what will you do? What's your role?
Yeah, I imagine you would have you've got to do a whole new marketing approach, because people are going to say, I think also, picking up on what Isabel just said, in many people's minds, that production is so, or that work, that play is so much Zoe's in a lot of theater goes about. You are left with quite a marketing job, and what are you going to do?
Well, I think it's one of those double-edged swords, because you certainly don't want to play that down prior to coming to New York with Zoe Caldwell. And we didn't. However, I also think that, like Terence McNally, Zoe is a creature of the theater. And she is well known, enormously well known to people who love the theater and have gone over the years. However, as a mass media celebrity star, it's not something she's ever sought or been interested in, and her world, you know, is very much the theater. So we were aiming, you know, at a certain audience initially, the core group who would respond to that. And we were all happily surprised a little to hear that Patti LuPone was the choice, because it's not immediately what you would think. And I think people were expecting something much more traditional, of an actress of long standing who's been around forever and done worthy things, and it's a very difficult thing to do. And Patti is a great person on the stage in terms of strength. We have seen her be a diva. She is a great diva. You know, if anyone who's seen Evita, she holds the stage in a very powerful, theatrical way, which is what Zoe does in Zoe's way. Patti does it in her way. So hopefully, and I must say that the reaction to everybody in the press and in the theater community has been uniformly positive, of saying, what a good idea. And of course, Patti, you know, has been very much in the forefront of things over the last few years, and personally had her own show earlier this season on stage. And oddly enough, she came to see a matinee on the day that we didn't, or she didn't have a matinee day. So she came to see Zoe in the afternoon, and saw the performance, and went back and was so knocked out by Zoe's performance that she was, you know, she thought, well, how can I can't go out on the stage now, I can't do that, you know. So anyway, she went out there, and she ended up, as there's part of her show where she conversed with the audience, she talked about Zoe Caldwell and talked about Maria Callas and how thrilling it was and all this, and she did that for a few days, and we get reports backstage, and she talked about you again today on stage, you know. And so there was this little something going there, you know, and Patti was very stimulated, and then very much without any idea ever that she'd end up being the one to come in. And she's very up about it, and very scared about it, and all the things that Zoe was too. And so I think that we have a wonderful kind of basic good feeling. Sometimes you have plays or replacements or stars where they go, oh no, you know, you can't, you're not going to do that.
But on the other hand, you can't use a theme of, you know, if you thought Zoe was wonderful, wait until you see.
Right, exactly.
So how are you going to turn around and say this is an exciting?
Well, you'll see a photograph of Patti with a ghosted Callas in the background. So and the photograph and the art treatment of it is going to hopefully be exciting to look at. Patti also will bring her own personality and acting into it.
And where will you focus your particular area on?
I think basically that, and this is a great reminder too, that this is not a vehicle, this is not a one-woman concert, this is not a master class, it's a play. And while Zoe brings all of her electricity and personal stamp to it, there's no question that director Folia is going to come in and collaborate with Patti, and they're going to come up with their own things. And you're going to see the masterclass experience, and you're going to see Patti in it. And hopefully, there'll be the person after Patti, you know.
Your publicity is going to be that?
Well, also, Patti is a personality. She's well known. People know her.
I'd like to find out what publicity is in the show.
Well, the first thing is the announcement, and we've had an announcement. Announcements of this order get leaked, you know, and so nothing to do about it, no matter how hard we try. And one has to give up the idea of control, which is
Isn't that somehow useful? If you know it's going to come, then use it.
If you're the one playing the card, sometimes it can be quite unuseful, especially if a deal isn't set. You know, that can be quite unfortunate. But in this case, it was, and it was fine. And you can't, when you're dealing with somebody of that level, it's hard. Sometimes, yes, you can plant, you know, as the White House does. What a surprise this leaked, you know. But you also want to shape it, and you want to make it an announcement. And Peter Marks, the New York Times, has had it in his column. It's been in the other papers. And then selectively, and of course Patti did a tremendous amount of publicity for her own show earlier, so we are very much in tune with that, and Philip Rinaldi, who did the press on that show, because she's hit many of the places already that one would ordinarily go to. And also you want to give Patti a chance to play this in front of an audience. So at some point, there will be critics. And that, if you will consider that publicity, in a sense it is, because it says she's here, they respond to her, and she, you know, she's in this role now. And so then it becomes also, how much can Patti do in one day? How much can Zoe do in one day? And the practicalities of it, one has to really be sensitive to. And the truth is, my theory is that the only absolute job they have is to go out there and do their stuff on stage. And if we can make it comfortable enough and appropriate enough and the right things, and Zoe is so not connected to the idea of publicity, it's always like a surprise, or like, why am I asking her, you know? And you have to sort of explain it and make it seem worthwhile, because she really concentrates so fiercely, you know, every day. And Patti also is a very intense, she approaches it in the same intense way. So we try to only ask the important things. We try to put them in an order where, if the New York Times has announced it and the other papers have announced it, it'd be great to make a network television morning show, or in some cases 2020, or the CBS Morning News, Sunday morning, or all these magazine shows.
Will they go on early morning shows? Will Patti do
Yes,
this?
they will. Now, you can't book them for, you know, like a crazy tour of doing everything in 1 week, which you couldn't do anyway. But you have to really be selective, and you have to, again, my job is to coordinate what the needs are of the Today Show. If there's an interest and a slot, to get someone, A, who's going to interview who has seen the show. Many times, or sometimes, they get to the show and the interviewer says, well, I haven't had a chance to see you, but I hear you're great. Tell us about your show. And it's like not a good thing for people who work from, you know, integrity.
Picking up on that, what do you say? You know, this is not a seminar today in acting, but give us would you give us a kind of a, what do you do when you pick up the phone to the Today Show? What do you say to get through? You know, hey, you want to do an interview? Right. Have I got an interview for you? What do you do? Well, I understand that you know these people,
right? But
still,
as Lewis goes to his longtime investors, these are people that you build up relationships with over the years, and hopefully, and as Alan says about the agents who tell you the truth, that over the years you have a shred of integrity with these people, and that they know it's worth taking the call at least and talking to you. And one of the great things on Masterclass was we had Philadelphia, and then we had a break. Then we had Los Angeles, and we had a break. And when they say in the old days that the drums started beating, I'm telling you, the timpanis were loudly sounding. And so people would get the word. And the best thing I can do is tell my contact, or encourage my contact at the Today Show, get on the train and go to Philadelphia. Or if you're in Los Angeles, go see the show. Because then I can suggest and tell them what's up, but they don't have all day either. They've got their needs. So my job is to make it easy for them, wave the flag a little bit and say, pay attention to this one, really.
And be selective, I guess that's the most important thing.
And not drub them every single day with a new idea that clearly they couldn't lose.
Well, there's the other thing now. I want to go back a second, because there's the old saying that a good idea has a million fathers and a bad idea is an orphan. Who had the idea for Patti LuPone? Fess up, somebody.
Well,
maybe Doris.
I think Alan.
Hold the cover.
Terrence.
Well,
Terrence. It was. I had made up a spectacular list, I thought, and we sat, and everybody came in with their list, and Patti was actually on Terrence's list, and the idea is Terrence's.
That's interesting. We've been involved with these producers before, and I chat almost every other day with Doris, and we knew that this time was coming, and Doris sort of said, who would you think of? And among the several names that we kicked around in our office, my partner, John Wilner, suggested Patti LuPone as well. Now it was put off, and I would assume a totally independent decision on your part, but some of us did think of her as such a dynamic personality. So it's really...
Exactly, and of course
we said,
idea.
It was our idea.
Right, so there's several people, obviously, that have thought of it, because it is such a great idea.
Doris, what is your job in this? You're being very quiet.
I mean, you're a traffic cop, but I mean...
That's about it.
No,
Cop,
I would say Doris is just as important on our production side, the same thing that Dianne does for the theater of the show itself.
Basically, it's like coordinating, yeah.
Exactly.
Do you speak for Bob, for example?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I do, because I kind of know what his answer would be. And occasionally I hesitate and say, no, I must really finally check with him. But I worked with him for so many years that I can kind of second guess him. And it's a matter of just the opposite, being in the office. What Dianne does on the stage is to coordinate with all the departments.
And make sure the right people are talking to the right. The other
And
people.
sometimes Doris is the only one who has all the pieces of the puzzle.
Oh, yeah.
She knows what Louis said and Robert said and what I called and asked this morning and Dianne said this. And Doris sometimes is the only place where you finally get all the pieces.
Now, if I wanted to get, if I was a playwright or a director or an actor, and I wanted to get to Lewis Allen or Robert Whitehead, and I would possibly get to you, I would probably get to you first, maybe.
Yes.
How would I get by you to them?
With difficulty.
Exactly. But what might compel you to do that? I realize that I'm asking you professional secrets, but I think it's an interesting...
Well...
Is there anything that maybe makes you go to either Bob or to Louis or something and say, you know, this person... Have you ever had that happen?
Yes, I've had certain things.
Why?
It's sort of like Alan answering that he pays attention to what's going on and sees a lot of things off Broadway and in workshops. And I'm also affiliated with a school called the Neighborhood Playhouse. And Robert is the president of that board, too. So being part of that, I see all of their productions, and so I know if there's a great new talent that's coming out, and that maybe that person should be seen by someone like, at least have a meeting, get counsel, or I'll have them come into the office and talk to me about giving them a little bit of the truth and the hurt of it and the encouragement. But playwrights do submit scripts, and people do send in their photographs, and we try to read as much as we can, but it's almost impossible to read the plays that come in. But you try to pay attention.
At this point, hold it. Remember what you said, because you're going to continue when we get back. We have to take a break now, and only for a couple of minutes, and please don't go away so we can come right back again and continue this discussion on working in the theater and production. Thank you. Sorry, Doris.
This is CUNY TV, Channel 75.
We're continuing the American Theater Wing seminars on working in the theater. And this seminar is on the production of Masterclass, that wonderful, exciting show that's playing on Broadway right now. We have the entire team that brought it to light. And behind them stands still another team that is not with us today. But these are the spokespersons for the production of Masterclass. And as we were talking, we talked about how it started in the office of Doris Blum and went on to all the people that are here. George White is our co-chairman, and George is president of the O'Neill Center in Waterford, Connecticut, and on the faculty of Yale, and a marvelous director both here and abroad. And so, George, with all of those credits on your shoulders, it now behooves you to bring out the best here.
Thank you, Isabel. Well, it's easy with this crowd, but I wanted to get on to something. We talked a little bit about the selection of the theater in which it's playing, because of its the sense of a concert hall and intimacy and all of that. But there also, it is a member, I believe, of the New York Theater, if that's what it's called, the Alliance, which, other than being a cabal, I wondered if you could perhaps, Louis, tell us a little bit about what the Alliance is, because it's a rather revolutionary concept.
Right. I'm sorry Bob Whitehead isn't here because he really was almost the primary with the founder of the Alliance through the League of American Theaters. It was set up, it's called the Broadway Alliance, it was set up because of the enormous costs of doing plays on Broadway. And it seemed to so prohibitive that it has become, and still is, very difficult to do a straight play on Broadway. So working with all the unions and the league, the managers, the company managers, the press agents, everybody
All the unions
take a 25% cut in their fees, their normal fees. The production itself has a cap of, I think it's $2,500 a week now for any salary. You can't pay anyone more than that. Let's see, what else? Well, and of course the ticket prices then are limited to the top price of an off-Broadway show. Now, you can see this does make the whole production cheaper. It makes it cheaper to run and so on. And that's the idea behind it. There are a couple of problems with it too, I'll get into in a moment. But this is how we did the production. So we were able to do the whole thing for a modest $600,000 sum. The participants take all these cuts. If the show is profitable, when it goes into profit, 10% of the profits go into a profit pool. It's held for them, and they all share in that pool when the play finally closes. So in effect, if the play is successful, they'll finally end up making, not only making back what they've cut, but making back more. It's a strange thing. This is the only one, the only other play that's made a profit was Love, Valor, and Compassion on the Broadway Alliance, and that barely made a profit. It moved to Broadway and just barely paid off, and so a lot of things hadn't been tested. We are in a peculiar position now of coming up. We were able to get Zoe Caldwell because she's my other partner's wife, Mrs. Robert Whitehead. And so she has a backdoor participation there. But it's a very difficult thing to get any major star to commit to doing a play on Broadway with a $2,500 top. That's one thing. I think they're going to raise that coming up in May. We hope that will be raised somewhat.
Why is that? Why will you raise the net on that?
Because it's very difficult. How many stars are going to come in and work for that amount of money on Broadway? It's very difficult to get them. And the whole point of this thing is to make productions possible. But if you make it difficult to get stars, then
well, then you're going to get right back into what caused you to focus on an alliance there in the first place.
It would go to 3,500 probably. That's what is being talked about. And that is not, again, you know, much of a salary for a Broadway star. In any case, it's always evolving. Every few months they meet and they make a few changes and adjust. They keep fine-tuning it.
Now, does that go for theater, or can any theater get in on this? Let us say
all the theater owners, there are certain theaters designated, and what they have done is pick the theaters that are the least desirable, the most difficult for them to book. They become Broadway Alliance theaters.
I see.
The Golden is a kind of exception because I think the Golden is a lovely theater, and it's and right on 45th Street. It's got a marvelous location. I think we're lucky. I think it may be the best one of all the Alliance theaters.
Well, it's an intimate theater too,
yeah. Yes, it's intimate.
But that does affect. What is your top ticket price as opposed to what it would normally?
Well, it was $45. We got a special dispensation to go to 50, because we can only Zoe could only do 7 performances a week, and not only cutting down to 7 performances, making one less, and holding the ticket price at $45 made it a very dicey proposition financially, you see. So they gave a special dispensation, only as long as Zoe is in it, unless they
Did you get that special dispensation from the unions?
Yes, we had to go back through the league and through the unions.
And
yes.
doing only the 7 performances?
Everybody agreed to that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, actually, Dan, you're really the point person for the union as well, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
At least for equity. I mean, in terms of. Not in terms of negotiating. You're not the equity deputy, I know. Yeah. But basically, you have to control it's equity people, and you're on top of that.
And I actually act as kind of like the middleman between the actors, the unions, and the producers. And if indeed at some point they want to set up a rehearsal or whatever, the producers will have to come to me. They say they want to work on the day off. I say, I can't do that. The union won't allow us to work on the day off. And so, yes, I'm kind of like the middleman, you know.
Right. And then you work under this alliance contract as the actors do.
But I am a member of Actors Equity. Stage managers are members of Actors Equity.
Good.
So
that's interesting that they come under that.
Yes,
union.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
When you sign a performer to your production that's going to open, do you have to state that it's going to be an alliance production?
Yeah.
Oh, you have to
Right,
determine
very
that from the
beginning?
beginning. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't make the decision afterwards that you think this show will be better off at an alliance theater at its small
No,
theater.
you go in on that basis.
You go in
But
right
the
at
problem
the
is you
beginning.
get in, you can't
And
go
all
out.
the contracts.
You can't get out. That's one of the problems. When you finally get in, even though we've paid off and run the full course of all the contracts, we still have to stay on that as long as we're in New York.
Well, it's like an irrevocable trust.
Yes, exactly.
But of course,
exactly.
How many alliance theaters do you think Broadway can support?
Well, they have a lot more than there are. There are very few Broadway Alliance shows. I mean, they just stand there waiting, and as far as I know, let's see, is there something else on this season?
Is Buried Child Broadway
Buried
Alliance?
Child, I think probably is going to be a Broadway Alliance.
The San
That's the only other one.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
that was a lot. Yes, right. That went back. I wanted to get quickly. There was a story indicated about how the production went. The beginning of how did Terence come to write this play, and I think, isn't it true, Karen? You shared this with me at the break. Had to do with a Manhattan Theater Club benefit.
Yeah, Terence tells this story of at a benefit. I guess Nathan Lane did a piece from Lisbon Traviata, and then Zoe got up and did a piece from Perfect Ganesh, and somehow things just clicked in his head, and he got the idea for Zoe doing a play about Maria Callas, and he wrote on the napkin. He said he had the opening line and the closing line of Masterclass right there on his napkin, and then just had to fill in everything in between.
I thought you should all know why you're here and how you got here, because that was how these great moments come about. I'd like to go back quickly to Bill a little bit more, because the one thing, and Jim too, because we have talked about what you do, but and how you do this. But I wanted to also talk about a little bit about. For instance, Jim, you have a stable of whom? I mean, you obviously have graphic artists. Are they part of your company? What, you know, you have to have a lot of people that interrelate to Bill's work too. Could you tell us about the stable of an ad agency, specifically in the Broadway theater milieu, if you will?
Sure.
Why don't we stick it to Broadway Alliance there?
Okay.
I think I'd like to know more about that, as how that relates to you, to your end and to yours, Bill. Are you both?
You all get cuts, yeah, exactly.
Well,
pay cuts because of that.
Yes, we do. But as far as the work goes, there is absolutely no difference.
Right.
We all come to the theater, I think I can speak for everyone, out of love for the theater. It's a privilege to work on Broadway. And I think I can say that about everyone that works in my office. My partners, Peter LeDon and John Wilner, and I have done this for our entire professional lives, about as long as Bill has. We've all known each other that long. And we have developed a group of people that work with us. Yes, we have artists on staff. Our art department, as Bill mentions, headed by Patrick Flood. Patrick is a brilliant young artist that we hired several years ago. He assisted for a while as assistant art director and moved to the position of art director as time went by, and he has hired 3 others who support him in his work. We have a television production editing facility within our offices, and Peter LeDon, as the creative director, works with our relatively small staff to develop ideas for projects as they come up. Everybody's involved. Anybody who has an idea is invited to voice it and to help in the creation of good advertising. The relatively small group of people that we have on staff are supported by talents wherever we can find them. We don't hesitate to hire graphic artists or directors or other creative people to produce good communication tools as the project calls for it. We're fortunate in that the people we have on staff are very talented, and very often we can do everything that we have to do with the people that we work with on a daily basis. But there are a wealth of very talented freelance people in this city and elsewhere, and we use them all.
Bill, do you have a large staff?
Well, it changes due to the workload, and we are, the nuts and bolts are that I am in a union, which is press agents and managers for theater, and the company manager and often the general manager and the press agents are in this union. If I work on one show, I can work on it myself, which of course you can't, you'd have an assistant, but in terms of the union, 2 shows I have to hire a union associate at a certain salary level. 2 of us can handle 3 shows. If a 4th show
Different
comes
level
in,
on an alliance?
it's all 25% less.
Oh, in other words, when you submit a budget and you know it's going into the alliance, that's
Right.
25%. Is that true with you, Jim, or not?
We're a bit more forthcoming. We work at half the usual compensation for a Broadway Alliance
Really?
production. Yes.
Now, does let's say the print media or television pick up on that? Do they charge 25%?
Well, to a certain extent, the New York Times gives us the what's called the off-Broadway rate, which is a reduced rate for the space that we purchase in the Times, and the Times is...
Is that for Alliance theaters?
Yes, yes, only for Alliance productions. Broadway theaters pay a certain rate structure in the New York Times, and it's a rather high one.
Even for the full-page ad in color?
For whatever we do with the New York Times. They saw the wisdom of maintaining, helping develop more healthy theater, and so they have contributed to that extent. The rest of the media, unfortunately for the Alliance, we do the best that we can in negotiating it, but there is no set formula per se, unlike the Times, which has been a little bit more responsive.
Is it just the Times, or does the Daily News, the Post have the same deal?
Those are negotiable.
They are negotiable.
To a certain extent, but there is no formal relationship as that regard.
You mentioned that the ticket price was comparable to the top ticket price of an off-Broadway show. Is that spelled out like that, or is it $45 or $50?
No, I understand it's spelled out like that.
It is spelled out like
There's
that.
certain talk of some off-Broadway show going to $50, in which case then the Alliance shows could go
But
there.
if the off-Broadway show reduces their ticket, can you reduce
Well, that
yours?
doesn't happen.
Well, it looks, some of them do, and there's some marketing that's being done on reduction of tickets. Do you have any rush tickets, or do you have any tickets that are a lower price for students, or
Well, it goes to TK, the theater.
come at the
Don't at the
announcement?
moment. We've just been selling out. We almost always go to TDF earlier on when we open a show. But in this case, it was virtually sold out from the beginning, you know. I don't remember that we did anything like that,
From
did
the
we?
first preview, it
Yes,
was totally
first preview.
sold out.
Yeah.
Nobody could buy a ticket.
There is a cancellation line at every performance, though, and I think every time at least somebody
gets
gets
something.
in.
Yeah.
That every time what?
At every performance, at least somebody who shows up and is willing to wait a little bit in the
Sure.
cancellation line is rewarded, does get a ticket.
You know, I've neglected to mention one factor, important factor in the Alliance. The theater owners, the Broadway Alliance theater owners, give you the theater rent-free until the show pays off, which is significant. I might add, however, that you do pay their expenses and overhead, which are fairly large.
Yes.
But above that, normally you'd pay 5% of the gross rental in addition to that, which they waive until the show pays off.
And when it pays off, then where do you go back?
You go right back to the normal, pay their extra 5%.
But also with the reduction, the 25% that you would,
No, we don't, no reduction.
no reduction.
No, they've taken their reduction by giving it to you rent-free.
I see, it's like a concession
Right.
of some kind.
Well, that's one other thing I wanted to. What does it take? What does it cost? I mean, you both have budgets. I know Bill and Jim have budgets that you have to deal with that are agreed upon, either both the Alliance and not. What is the average ad nowadays cost in the New York Times, a full page, half page, etc.?
The full Broadway rate is $60,000 for a full-page ad. It's an expensive proposition. incrementally, of course. They're smaller units.
Well, is that the same as it would be, let's say, if I wanted to take a full-page ad for Nike sneakers on the sports page?
They get a better rate.
They do.
They do. The theater has the highest, am I right?
You're absolutely right.
The New York Times page rate for advertising, the highest rate is for the theater.
It is.
Yeah. Wow. Sad state of affairs to some extent.
It's higher. Is it higher? I mean, is that theater and film, or just theater?
The Broadway theater pays more than any other industry in the New York Times.
Interesting. That's a very, yeah.
We have some questions here now, so here I am interrupting again. What would you like to ask him? To whom?
Hi, my name is Margot Evan. I'm an actor, and this question is directed to Dianne. Because of vocal rest, we understand that understudies are often called upon to go on. Who handles the rehearsal process?
It's basically me. We're responsible for getting the understudies prepared, making sure that they have correct costumes, if there has to be a new costume made for them, getting in touch with the designer, and also doing all of the rehearsal. And many times a director will come in and also work with them, and we've been very lucky because Lenny has done that with each understudy. He's come in and he's seen rehearsals and he's given them notes and things. But if somebody gets sick, the actor will call me, I will call the production people, and we'll call the understudy, and if indeed they need to rehearse with Zoe, which has happened, you know, we will come in and we will rehearse. And actually, this is a very, very rare thing, but Zoe has come to an understudy rehearsal and has done the rehearsal, which is quite extraordinary and very rare.
How long will you be rehearsing with Patti LuPone when she comes in?
We're starting at the very beginning of June, officially, and I believe that she'll probably be working with Lenny before that. Mm-hmm. But officially, we will start at the beginning of June.
When does the cast come in to work with her?
That would be...
right at the very beginning?
At the beginning of June, yeah.
So approximately how many weeks would that be?
It's scheduled for a 4-week rehearsal, mm-hmm. which will be approximately 3 weeks in a rehearsal room, and then the final week on stage, which is important to get used to the configuration of the stage. We also, our set has a dome, which for singers changes how they sing because it bounces. And the singers have found there's a certain spot that if they stand there, it just throws their voices out. Well, Karen, you know that, yeah. You can walk back and forth and hear the difference.
Is there something you want to say to that process?
Yeah.
The rehearsal process, or you mean finding the live spot on stage?
Oh. None of the above.
It's great to find that spot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really wild how the dome really makes a difference. You're suddenly standing here, you take one step forward, and you sound like you're on a microphone. Mm-hmm. And so it's great. The reverberation is really wonderful.
Next.
Hi, my name is Carly Welsh. I'm also an actor. And my question is for Ms. Cody, and I think to a certain extent Mr. Allen. If you could comment more on the development of the script, any changes that were made from Montana to Philadelphia to LA to New York, and at what role the producers play in that as well.
I was surprised at how little the script had changed because, you know, he had just freshly written it in Montana, and then that was in April, and then we got together the following January to start rehearsals, and I sort of figured that there would be lots and lots of changes, but there really weren't. I think it really came out of his head pretty much the way he liked it and was satisfied with it. There's been a lot of cuts, you know, tightening things up and moving some sections around, but it pretty much stayed the same. I don't know about...
No, very little change. I don't recall ever doing a play that had so few changes from the first to the last. I don't ever recall one.
Well, your character obviously didn't change then at all.
No.
Much, yeah.
I figured that I'd go from this much to this much, but I was still that much.
Yes.
Hi, Ellis Nassour. I'm a writer and a playwright. And Mr. Allen, I have a question for you. The wing programs in the high schools expose a lot of the young students to different roles that they can play in the theater. And a lot of the students always ask, how do you become a producer? They always seem to think that producers are immensely wealthy, but that's not always the case, right?
No,
Aren't you?
If I were, I wouldn't be producing any longer. I started off actually working as a scriptreader for Bob Whitehead way, way back. And we had known each other before the war, believe it or not. And I ran into him. I was working at had started a little import-export business that I was working in. I was going to quit and go back to college. And I was in a Nedick's we got together and I started having dinner, and he was raising money for Member of the Wedding, the play. And I loved the play, and in fact I was trying to be a writer. And I helped him raise a little money, and then it was successful. He invited me to some rehearsals, and then when it was successful, he said, how would you like to come and read scripts for me? And I thought that was great. I didn't have to keep strict office hours. I got to see a lot of shows and read scripts, and then the following year, he made me his assistant. And we did it on a play series, and 5 plays in 5 months there, and I was his assistant. He moved me right up, and I worked as his assistant and with Harold Clerman, who was doing a lot of his plays. I was Harold's assistant on 8 plays. I would sit at his side and take notes for him all through rehearsals, out of town. So I acted as both director and producer's assistant. I stayed on with Bob for a while, and then eventually I just started on my own when I found some projects that he didn't want to do, particularly a couple of films, and he wasn't really interested in movies.
Well, that's a great, I cannot think of a better pair of teachers than Harold Clerman and Bob Whitehead.
It was wonderful, and you know, almost every night at Bob's house, we'd have dinner or something, and there was always there, almost every night, was Harold and Bob, of course, and what's his name, the cartoonist? Hirschfeld. Al Hirschfeld.
Yeah.
Al Hirschfeld and Boris Aronson.
Well,
that was a talk late into the night. I went through all that, plus going through these plays, and I feel that I probably have more of a background, aside from Bob, say, really in the workings of the theater than any producer I know, anyway. Mm-hmm. Because that was 8 plays with Harold, and that was right through rehearsals, out of town, always at his side.
Well, he was also, again, a wonderful director, a great critic. And so that you're, you might want to say something without having, we won't quote you, but it'll be on the air anyway. So you're but there is you bring that up. Today, I've heard so many people say there aren't any old-time, and that's not a matter of age anymore, old-time producers. Would you care to speak to that? Because a lot of people have made a lot of money somewhere else and decide either on in the market or something, and suddenly hang out a shingle and say, I'm a producer. Has that been your
that
take?
is a symptom in part of the cost of shows, of raising money. And I say the old-time producers, I never recall when I worked with Bob almost never thinking about the money side of it, because they'd cost $75,000, and it was mostly friends and people that worked in the theater. They put up $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000, and it was just happened if you had a good show. And now as it's escalated, the costs, more and more, you have to get people coming in with a lot of money. And therefore, they want their name on it, and they're producers. So you see a bunch of names up there of producers, and how much experience, I won't, it varies with them, but most of them don't know a lot about it.
And have not had that training.
Oh, of course, no.
Yeah, so I don't know.
But there are some left. There are some left.
I think that I'm going to have to interrupt you once more and say that this is the production seminar of the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater seminars. And we've been extremely fortunate to be able to have the people that brought to the stage and the wonderful excitement of Masterclass, a play that's now playing on Broadway, and is really one of the most exciting, beautiful theatrical experiences that anyone can possibly see. And I thank all of you for being here. I wish there was more time. You've been so kind to share the knowledge that you have in who does what and what goes into a production and how it's produced. We in the audience see the magic, the lights, and the performances, but to be able to hear all the planning and all the problems and all of the work that goes in before is extremely important. It's important to us, and it's important to our students, and it's important to the American Theater Wing, who brings these seminars to you. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Ellen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was good. That was good.
Everybody warm up.
Yeah, I know it's What's the process for the afternoon session? Do you mind? Yeah, same thing.
Start around the same.
Okay, so take
starts off out. Yeah, yeah. Take it with. Okay.
Yes, hi, how are you? Oh, Alan?
We're old pals. The next series is in the fall. Dates I don't know yet. No, last year was October. About the 3rd or 4th week in October.